Good evening. Welcome to the Art for Justice Fund's celebration of Julie Mehretu and the art of ending mass incarceration. I'm so excited to see the numbers of people joining us tonight. And we are so very grateful to the Marian Goodman Gallery for your support, your partnership in making tonight possible. Why are we here? We're here to honor the generosity of Julie Mehretu and to lift up the extraordinary Art for Justice community, those who have dedicated themselves to working in common cause to end mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is a uniquely American atrocity, birthed from our legacy of chattel slavery, black codes, and Jim Crow. Today, our criminal legal system afflicts over 70 million Americans. That's 1 out of every 3 adults in this country who's been arrested or convicted of a crime. There is an especially profound human and financial cost to Black and brown families and communities who bear the brunt of this toll. And each night, the news brings us new images of unarmed Black and brown men, women, and children shot by the police. Over-policing is a fundamental element of our system of mass incarceration. And all of this has galvanized a new generation, people of conscience across this country, to stand up and demand justice. Change is now possible, and each of us has a role to play. The Art for Justice Fund is a 6-year initiative seeded with an extraordinary gift by art patron and philanthropist Agnes Gund. Since 2017, the fund has leveraged Agnes's gift with the contributions of many of you here tonight to pool resources and to move over $90 million in grants to hundreds of artists and activists working in concert to disrupt the key drivers of human caging and incarceration. For us, this means 1, ending money bail. On any given day, 450,000 Americans, that's the size of the city of Atlanta, languish in a jail, not because they've been charged with a crime, but because they can't afford to pay money bail. 2, excessive sentences. We are the only nation in the world that sees fit to sentence a child as young as 13 to prison without the possibility of parole. And 3, removing legal barriers to reentry. Even a misdemeanor record can result in the denial of housing, employment, the right to vote, and the right to see one's own children. What makes the fund unique is our support to artists and art organizations, challenging this dominant narrative and helping us to see, as only artists can, alternatives to this current system. This is what we like to call the new visions for shared safety. Tonight, we're going to have a series of conversations. Julie Mehretu's expansive work challenges us to not look away, but rather draws us in to examine the deeper layers of meaning embedded in her canvas. We hope tonight's program will do something similar for you. We are in a moment of reflection, reckoning, and rebirth. Here is an opportunity for us to emerge from this last year more equitable, stronger, and more just. So let's get started. Share your thoughts in the chat box. Give us a heart emoji when something resonates. Take a look at the links that we share. Reach out to us afterwards and get involved. This work requires all of us. Thanks to Artsy for hosting the sale of Julie's extraordinary painting on the fund's behalf. The auction page went live earlier today and will close on June 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information, please go to artsy.net/artforjustice to register and bid on the work. And now I have the privilege of introducing our beloved founder and chair of the Art for Justice Board, the guiding force behind this fund, Agnes Gund, a woman who continues to inspire.
Marcel Proust wrote, "Let us be grateful to people who make us happy, for they are the charming gardeners who make our souls blossom." What a metaphor, one that truly describes Julie Mehretu. If a gardener's skill is coaxing beautiful flowers from the soil, Julie's talent is filling a massive canvas with her confident and earthy marks. These abstracted maps create a unique visual language, conveying that our world is in a state of constant destruction and renewal. I admire how she references art history and loved her recent talk with Fong Bui, as he showed how she drew inspiration from Eugene Delacroix's 1830 Liberty Leading the People and Theodore Géricault's The Rapt of Medusa from 1819. I grew up taking classes at the Cleveland Museum of Art when I was just a child and memorized just about everything on those walls. I've long recognized that art is transformative. But just as art is a right and not a privilege, so too is equality and justice. I started Art for Justice to disrupt mass incarceration by funding both artists and advocates. That's what we need to foster safe and healthy communities for everyone. Art creates the compassion and empathy, all of which Julie embodies, to drive social change. It's an honor to thank Julie for her generous gift, very generous gift. I met her some 25 years ago and was immediately impressed, not just by her artistic genius, but by her strength and poise. Here was a woman unafraid of making a gesture with her grand scale and form. I'm also proud to call Julie a friend. A citizen of the world, she's bursting with curiosity and ideas, and I admire how lovingly she mothers her children while forging a brilliant career. That she's chosen to support the fund's grantee partners and secure abolition fills me with hope of a better tomorrow. Julie, you are indeed a charming gardener to whom we all are so grateful. Thank you.
Julie's place in the canon of American contemporary art is fixed. It's without question that she has really blazed a path of her own, but one that draws deeply on her antecedents in art history.
She causes us to look at art in a way that we haven't previously, and she combines that with a way of looking at the world that is poignant. One thing I enjoy about living with Julie's work is that she's a guidepost to what I can look for next in the generation that's coming behind her.
She is always thinking about earlier generations of artists, whether painters or people working in other media, but she also is someone who I think is deeply inspirational to younger generations of artists, kind of a collaborative, generative, outward-looking maker.
She is addressing current day issues that require resolution, and they are also a call to action.
She doesn't sugarcoat things, she doesn't simplify things, but she's a deep believer in our potential as a species and our potential as individuals. One of the most fundamental things that needs to shift is society's willingness and ability to imagine the experiences and the lives of people who are either themselves incarcerated or the many, many rippling effects of mass incarceration on families, communities, on all of us.
She exposes that, but then challenges us to do all we can do to rectify those ills. She holds us responsible through her work for our actions as a society. It is clear Julie is convinced that we, in fact, can do better.
How do we give voice to people who have been silenced but who have a lot to say? This contribution of a painting to Art for Justice is, of course, an extremely impactful thing to do, an impactful act. There's really no artist that I can think of who is more perfect to be involved with Art for Justice in this way.
Living in this moment, in this time, and interacting with Julie's work that holds a mirror up to us and asks us to deal with these issues is completely timely. This will have an important impact on the organization and its ability to do the very important work it does in fighting hyper-incarceration.
Julie Mehretu, one of the great contemporary artists. You have this extraordinary show up at the Whitney. You are in just about every important museum and private collection in America and around the world. You also are passionate about justice. And when your friend Agnes Gund called you to tell you about what she was doing with Art for Justice, you immediately said, Aggie, I want to help you. What led you to do that?
Well, first of all, thank you for those are super kind words. It's such an honor to be involved with you and Aggie and to contribute to Art for Justice. But for me, ever since I was a young child, the idea of prison was horrifying. The concept of locking people away in cages, just it viscerally made me really very uncomfortable since a super young age. I remember thinking about that and being horrified by that. And I grew up in the age of when mass incarceration became a big phenomenon. I was a child of the 80s. I moved here in the early 70s. And so to see the Reagan years and to see the kind of breakdown and the kind of criminalization of people by these ideas around fear and anger, and to have that be this kind of desire to create these very punitive structures and systems always freaked me out, always was devastating. And friends of mine who would end up in jail or prison in Michigan, it was a terrifying reality. And we understood, even as young people, what that meant and who was at risk. And so for me, those early days when I first moved to New York City, when I first experienced and witnessed police brutality, not necessarily experienced, but witnessed that, when I first saw this kind of the power of being able to really completely abuse and disenfranchise people was terrifying. And it is, I think, a fundamentally terrifying aspect of any of us living in society right now, the possibility that could happen to one of us or our children.
And so what you said is, I'm going to create a special painting for you, Aggie. And yes, this is the treasure that you created, this monumental work, this complex, extraordinary canvas. Tell us about this painting.
So I wanted, when Aggie started this, I was so impressed with the kind of scope of what she wanted to do, that this was not about building an organization with an endowment, but really about putting together a lot of resources to address a problem on a scale as large as possible, to really take this on in a magnificent way. And one of the, I wanted to make a serious scale work to contribute to that and to maximize what I do and the strange kind of reality of what happens when work is being made. And when I'm working on painting, it's this very intense, deep kind of practice and gesture of invention and imagination and kind of trying to find liberation through the act of making and through questioning and trying to realize what might be possible. And so I wanted to leverage this situation, the kind of commodification that happens with this work of art that happens to all my work and that happens to a lot of artists' work in this world, and how that commodification, that has been part of the history of being, and especially within an extractive capitalist kind of structure. It's the history of Blackness in a way, the kind of insistence on power and agency despite commodification. And that's what I think exists in paintings and works of art, no matter what has happened to them and no matter where they are. A work of art can be transformative. So for me, I wanted to make something substantial and something that really encapsulated some of the kind of challenges that this situation in our reality gives us. So the title of the painting is Dissident Score. It's a painting that I've been working on in the studio since 2019. I've worked on it with my team here, and we've worked on it over those years and slowly and deliberately. And it wanted to make an important painting for the fund.
And in some ways, when you talk about this question of commodification, when you talk about the contradictions of our system, the systems of philanthropy, the systems of the market, which artists often find themselves injected into, sometimes unwillingly, you have to live with that contradiction and the discomfort of that.
Yeah.
And philanthropy is also something that is at that intersection of commerce, but also beauty and a desire to make a difference in the world and a desire for more justice. So how do you assess this?
Well, this is a super complicated and in many ways uncomfortable reality. And I think, Brian Stevenson talks about these ideas of getting proximity and then really trying to invent something else. But within that, there is these points of discomfort. And the reality is, we shouldn't have to be here. We shouldn't have to be in a situation where we're trying to raise resources for justice or to really address an unjust system. We shouldn't be immersed in the middle of an unjust system where, because of your economic status or because of the color of your skin or your background, you end up incarcerated. That you end up completely imprisoned and stripped of your human rights and your capability and your agency. Children shouldn't have to live behind bars for the rest of their lives. These are unconscionable sins, I think, of our world. And the fact that we are living in this, we're all implicit and we're all complicit in this larger system. And that's the contradiction that we live and make in. That's the contradiction that I live and make in, where these works become these other kinds of commodities, but they are also, my intention and insistence on them is their capacity to do something else. And so fundamentally, I think that's one of the challenges around philanthropy. We shouldn't live in systems where we have to give our resources to make the world better. Our resources in our general, larger, collective effort should be able to imagine a different kind of world. And I hope that that's what I love about the Art and Justice Fund is this desire of invention and belief in artists and thinkers and musicians and performers and other creative thinkers to kind of contribute to the visionary possibilities of what we're collectively imagining as a different type of reality for art, for justice, and for dealing with those systems, the carceral system in this country.
Well, we have some questions from the audience, and so we are going to have that conversation.
All right.
The first question is coming from Donna Hilton.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's so great to be here with you all. My name is Donna Hilton, and I am president and founder of A Little Piece of Light. And I'm also, my organization, also grantee of Art for Justice Fund. And we're just so honored and pleased to be here and share this moment with you all. And Julie, I just want you to know, I went to see your exhibit at the Whitney Museum, and I went and I had just had surgery, but I had to go because I just had to see it. And when I went, I want you to know that it inspired me so much, and it just made me wow, get lost in the ways in which the colors and the themes that you created. And I wanted to know what was the inspiration for that, because it inspired me, just made me get lost in thought. And so I want to know what inspired you and to make your art become pieces that we could use in this space for activism and just create change. And so I'd love to hear what your inspiration is, because you definitely inspired me.
Thank you so much. fundamentally, I think my work comes from this place of trying to make sense of who I am and the reality around us, but also a way to try and insist on existing differently than many things in the world try to insist or maintain the way that we can or cannot behave. And there's so much in the world that can make one feel that they don't have the agency for change, or they don't have the capacity for affecting change or imagining something different. And I think for me, I find myself to be most potent in that space, in painting and in drawing and in the practice of actually creating work and what can happen because of my belief in the transformative change that can happen in front of a work of art. But also, I think that there are other ways of being engaged in that. And for me, I think a big part of that is working collectively with other artists and other thinkers and other people, activists and agents. And so Denniston Hill is another way that I try to actualize that in the world, where we can kind of invent ways to be in the place of refuge in the Catskills, or in creating different kinds of works, or in different kinds of discussion, to collectively work on imagining different types of radical futures.
Indeed. Have you always wanted to be an artist, Julie?
Yes, since I was very young. It was a very deep desire, dream, but I didn't think that a life would be possible making art. I didn't grow up in a world where contemporary art was something that was an everyday. In mid-Michigan, in the mid-'70s, that wasn't something that you grew up around in the same way that you would have maybe here.
Let's hear from Nicole Fleetwood.
My name's Nicole Fleetwood. I'm the author and curator of Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration, which received funding from the Art for Justice Fund. Thank you. And I'm delighted to be here tonight. I'm enjoying this great conversation between Darren and Julie. Julie, I'm so struck by the movement and the physicality of your paintings, and I'm wondering if you could talk more about your process. One, the actual physical demands on you as an artist to make these works, but also how you encapsulate movement in the painting itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. First of all, I just want to say how incredibly moving your exhibition was at PS1. Marking Time was a show that really shifted and affected me in a deep way, because what in terms of this idea of proximity, this kind of what I know so well in the studio is how one can find freedom in making something, and in the aspect of invention, in the aspect of creation, and to see the most deliberately, deeply investigative works of art that are being made by incarcerated people, and the incredible detail in the drawing and the capability and the invention and the liberty that is afforded by that invention was so moving. And I have to say that was such an incredible show, and I think it was so profound for so many artists to see, whether it was work that was being snuck out or whether it was work that was being done in a daily practice. Whatever it was about insistence on not being caged up. It was an insistence on not being held back. It was an insistence on individuality outside of the state, within that kind of real self, this other space of continued humanity in a way.
Well, and this is you, the passionate artist, talking about another artist and the work and the curation that Nicole did, which was genius. But Nicole wants to hear from you about your practice and discuss.
I mean, the paintings I have to work out to stay in shape to make paint. But I think more than anything, to be engaged and to be attentive, not just to what's happening inside the work, but be attentive to what's happening to me while I'm working, but also what's happening around me. And so there are always this kind of back and forth between what's happening in the world and being attentive to what's happening in the work itself.
Great. Another question from Alva Greenberg.
Good evening. I'm Alva Greenberg. I'm a major donor to the Art for Justice Fund. I was greatly inspired by Aggie's generosity in starting this fund, and I hope that more people will join me in being a major donor. It's an especial honor, Julie and Darren, to participate in this conversation with you. And Julie, it was stunning to hear of your generosity in donating a painting to be auctioned for the fund. Your show at the Whitney was wonderful. I spent a long time in the quiet galleries there. And I noticed that the new, more recent work, the energy and the tension in those paintings is obscuring the underpinnings of what you see in the earlier canvases. I'm wondering if this is a response to the current turmoil of these past years, or if it comes from some kind of internal artistic progression.
Thank you, Alva. These paintings have evolved from my previous paintings, and the blurred images I felt became this really haunting manifestation of many of the kind of mediated images we were seeing of different events taking place in our world or right around us. And they became certain images, especially when they were blurred, became almost like ghosts and specters of that moment or of that time, such as this painting, which has images, blurred images of Rohingya villages that were burned and ravaged by that. But these figures emerge from within that ravaged landscape. And to me, that blurred image, not necessarily knowing what that image is, but that image allows for some kind of sense, visceral sense of heightened, almost sublime experience is what I was most interested in. And like, it allows for the marks and for what happens in terms of the stencils and almost like suggestions of different bodies and participants in this kind of immersive experience is kind of, there's something haunting and visceral about that I was really interested in exploring.
Well, and you really love exploring complexity. I mean,
Yeah.
I think some artists, the way they demonstrate complexity is through simplicity. Your canvases are complex. They are deep and searing and demand something of the viewer that is really both exciting, exhilarating, and it can also be exhausting because you are dealing with some deep, deep issues. And as Pamela Joyner said so beautifully, you sort of hold the mirror up to the viewer and demand something. Engaging a Julie Mehretu painting is not a passive experience.
Well, hopefully there's something that transformative that can happen, whatever that is, viscerally, just a felt experience. And to me, those are the works that I feel, works that can do that. That's what I try to do with the paintings in the studio, when they actually get to something else for me, that they don't feel redundant or feel repetitive of something else. It's something new occurs in them, is the haunting that I'm looking for.
So we've got a last question from Ebony Underwood.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Ebony Underwood. I'm a social entrepreneur, content creator, and proud daughter of this man right here, Bill Underwood, my father, who in January 2021, after 33 long years of incarceration, received the compassionate release from federal prison. Like millions of children across the US, I was devastated by my father's incarceration. And so I founded the nonprofit We Got Us Now, a grantee partner of Art for Justice. Before I get into my question, I just want to share that I'm so excited to hear about Julie's gift to the fund. To see you in conversation with Darren makes me elated. This is such important work. Okay, here goes my question. The issue of mass incarceration has been a debilitating one for my family and for so many others. Organizing other daughters and sons that understood firsthand its impact was super important to me. If you haven't already, Julie, what might a galvanized group of artists achieve together for a more fair, just, and equitable society?
That's a great question. Thank you, Ebony and Bill. And thank you for the amazing work you do with We Got Us Now. That's incredible for all of us. But I think that's what's the core, what you're bringing up is core for all of us as artists and as people involved in our community, caretaking for our community, and sharing in this reality is eliminate bail, and support as many bail funds as that we possibly can until the elimination of the bail system. prevent young people from getting incarcerated and building new types of programming. And as artists, we need to collectively be engaged in other forms of imaginative work. Denniston Hill, we're really trying to think of how does the media and how does agriculture and farming, how can we engage in this work creatively to really think through other ideas around exodus and liberation in terms of what is possible for how we can engage not just previously incarcerated communities in this work, but how can we share with this work inside and for anyone coming out in the outside wanting to engage in a different way again. And fundamentally, I think we have to, this is the core civil rights issue of our time, is ending mass incarceration, working towards the elimination of that, but also trying to imagine collectively, really engage with how can we think of radically new forms of restorative justice, contributions to that, and abolition.
So do you feel hopeful, Julie Mehretu? Do you feel that we are at a moment where progress can be made? Obviously, through Art for Justice, we are making progress. That's been demonstrated.
We have to put more resources into these situations to support projects like Ebony's and to support many of the kind of amazing projects that are being started on shoestring budgets, on tiny budgets, on people who are volunteering massive amounts of time. So many underpaid lawyers and activists and social workers and community service people who are working in communities to deal with this injustice. And there's an enormous resource in what we can do if we are really engaged in trying to collectively imagine something else. And what does that mean to actually clear ground and really think through collectively other alternatives and other forms of dealing with justice and crime in our world, and how we think about that. How can we change that narrative?
So Julie Mehretu, thank you. Thank you for your passion, your determination, your using your creative genius, the brilliance that is Julie Mehretu towards this objective of ending mass incarceration in America. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here with all of you to celebrate this special occasion. The role of our gallery is to support the artist, not only in their work and the development of their career, but also at the core of Marian Goodman's gallery since the 1970s is to be in unison with the artist's social vision and beliefs. And therefore Marian and the gallery team is utterly united with Julie and the work for the Art for Justice Fund in this collective effort to end mass incarceration in the United States. It is a crisis of epic scale, and it is being met head-on with a gift by Julie of an epic painting. Julie's art has palpable power and resonance in person, and not surprisingly, the market and demand for her work has the weight and strength of financial power. In this case, the collector who acquires Julie's stunning painting becomes an engineer of sorts and joins us to transform that power as a means to achieve the goal of the fund. This is the action of history painting. The artist making work with profound meaning while we harness the agents of the art market to make history and bring about the reform that is absolutely necessary. Marian and the gallery want the sale of this monumental painting in the forthcoming auction powered by Artsy to propel the fund to its goal, and we are delighted that all of the proceeds from the sale will contribute to that end. I hope you enjoy the rest of this wonderful evening.
Thank you, Emily Jane. Our grantee partners are the heartbeat of our work. Their leadership, creativity, and collaboration has already created considerable cultural and legal change around the nation. Here are two of our partners, Cheryl Rowland and Sarita Steed, who will share how their efforts are changing the narrative and driving change. Cheryl is based in Greensboro, North Carolina. His artistry has already started to create new conversations. Since his exoneration, he has created the Jumpsuit Project, which they will discuss. Sarita is based in New Orleans. She founded Operation Restoration in an effort to strengthen reentry services for women and girls who are so often left out of the conversation. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl and Sarita in conversation.
Welcome, Cheryl. How are you? I'm so happy to be in conversation with you today.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine. Pleasure's all mine. I'm excited to hear more about your work as we dive into these questions.
Me as well. I definitely want to ask you, I know you're a multidisciplinary artist and you're well known for the Jumpsuit Project. And in these performances, you wear an orange jumpsuit. And for me, that was so amazing because for a long time after me being released from prison, I didn't even want to be in the color orange, let alone put on another jumpsuit willingly, right?
Yeah.
So I know that immediately challenges everything that people think about what it is that you're trying to convey. So just tell me a little bit about that and how you came to that.
When I came back, I did have an opportunity to return to school because I was in graduate school when I got taken out of it and wrongfully incarcerated. So I played the card to go back and finish my master's degree. And in doing that, that was the community that I had a lot of questions for. I began to question the space. Do I belong here with this experience? I don't have the same open-eyed face, new to the world, excited about learning, flair that a lot of the students on campus had, right? I'm returning and I'm like, I've been, I've seen the world now, and I really had questions about society and how I'd be treated if I just was honest about myself in this experience. And all these things I had to do myself, even when I first went into intake and everything, I had to deal with my prejudices and prejudging the people before and that experience before I even got in there, So I knew the work that I had done through the experience and felt that that's the start, that's the build. We need to have conversations, open and honest conversations in everywhere, and I think a lot of hesitation is because it's not appropriate workspace conversation or classroom conversation, but yet these things affect our lives.
So how do you think that will shift, folks? Or what do you hope to shift as it relates to how they think about mass incarceration?
Yeah, I hope in that injection into that space was something that a reminder that, people go to court every day, every weekday, that practice of adjusting to that prejudice of an orange jumpsuit, African-American male in an orange jumpsuit should be a practice on any type of, situation and openness to talk about our differences. That shift was the shift in control that I had with the spaces that I had access to. And I do believe you have to start somewhere, and starting someplace close and familiar for me was my first step.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, all right, I'll give you gave me a question. I'll give you a question. In the Pre-Sister exhibit, it seemed like you were also shifting ideas around women who are impacted by incarceration. Can you share a story of how it impacted the folks involved or maybe the attendees?
Yeah, so the Persistent exhibit was something that we worked on over the course of a few years. Initially, we didn't understand or we didn't know that it would be Persister. It was a lot of community perspectives and voices coming together to say, hey, what type of exhibit could we create? But of course, me being who I am, and I'm just like, hey, it should be focused on women. Louisiana was at a special time where they were going through like justice reinvestment. And I remember being at a presentation of the justice reinvestment research, or, what they found after they looked at our systems and how we incarcerate folks. And one slide addressed women out of the 50 slides they presented. And I'm like, there's so many women that are incarcerated, and like, we only get one slide, we're an afterthought. And, it just really got to a point that I didn't see anybody talking about mass incarceration as it related to folks like me, people who look like me, who had my experiences or the experiences of other women. So we were very intentional about bringing together artists that could disseminate art in multiple ways. So, we had photography, we had contemporary paintings, you had paintings that were renderings of individuals, we had a timeline, we had cartoons, so we wanted to be able to like really touch anybody who came in, and that everyone who walked through the door would really be able to follow this timeline of mass incarceration in this country. And then also specifically focus on a population that we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. If I could say how people were affected, formerly incarcerated women, I know that they were triggered a lot of times walking through, but it also was an experience where this is the first time that a lot of them were able to have their stories heard, let alone be inside of a museum and people come in and see what had happened to them. Because as you say before, it's some type of shame. You don't talk about it. You're told to move on or forget about it. But it was freeing in a sense that you could tell your story, and the ugliest point of your life became the most beautiful forms of artwork. That is what I have taken from Persister and Operation Restoration, is that it is very easy to create something and that it lives and dies with you. But, how do you get something to live beyond you? And how do you get to communicate that message out? So I think for me, that's what it's all about.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I can relate to that. I think it's exciting. The work will continue to help build and encourage and enlightening communities.
And it all just started with, the thought, so I'm happy that it's traveling in the way that it's traveling, but I'm also excited to see the other iterations of the show in different states and different communities that people can make about the history of, incarceration in their state as it relates to women.
Yeah, I can't wait for it to come get closer to me. To make it to South Carolina, if you come up, let me know. I want to come check out the show. I like that, you had that kind of inclination to like get all different types of mediums, or like work with different types of artists who can, translate these experiences. It's really nice. It's really rich. Thank you. I feel like, I knew I was going to get a lot out of this conversation, and I'm excited, to keep talking with you, off air as well. And I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to working with you in the future as well. And I think that that's one of the great things that, Art for Justice has done, is bringing people together that normally may not have had an opportunity to meet or talk. And then the collaborations that come out of that is always just amazing to me. So thank you for being in conversation with me today as well. I really appreciate it. I, of course, learned a lot. And I'm excited about possibly working with you in the future.
Yeah, me too.
So before we end this evening's program with some music, it is my great privilege to introduce Marian Gund, another force behind the Art for Justice Fund, someone who embodies what it means to be an artist, an activist, and a donor. Somebody who has worked so tirelessly for Art for Justice, our champion, Marian Gund.
What a great night this has been. It's been such a special night for me as a huge friend and fan of Julie's. I am Marian Gund. I am on the governing board of Art for Justice. I'm also Aggie's daughter. Aggie started this fund with $100 million, as you all know. She took a piece of art and put an intention behind it and turned that art into an investment in the imagination to end mass incarceration. At Art for Justice, our hope and vision for the future is that it looks more like healing and less like punishment, that we're able to really follow artists and formerly incarcerated leaders in imagining what a just future looks like. Part of what I think is really important about Art for Justice is that it's a spend down. From the beginning, it was determined that that money would go into the field to the artists and the activists in almost a form of reparations. One great thing about Art for Justice is that we're not just about taking away. We're about building things up, creating something new. We have a wonderful grantee partner named Deanna Van Buren, who is an architect, literally imagining building a world without prisons. So it's not just saying, let's get rid of things. We can't just defund the police and take down all the prisons and jails. What will it look like when we have guidance counselors and nurses and coaches and people who are in support in a school instead of police? If we have spaces where people can go if they're having mental illness challenges, where we have centers that people can go to if they're having drug addiction problems, instead of just putting people in cages. Julie is joining incredible artists who have partnered with us at Art for Justice as donor partners. And Aggie would never ask an artist to give to the Art for Justice Fund. She knows that artists are asked constantly. But Mark Bradford was so moved by a conversation he had with two of our grantee partners, Russell Craig and Jesse Crimes, that he offered an addition, and he was our first artist partner. And we are so grateful for his modeling. And after that, Jeff Koons has given a piece. And then one of our grantee partners, Dwayne Betts and Titus Kafar, gave us one piece from the edition that actually was funded by Art for Justice, and they've donated that. So for those attending tonight, there are lots of ways to get involved. Of course, you can start by visiting our website. Please follow the social media of any and all of our grantee partners who are so inspiring and fascinating and always have new ideas. You can get involved in all kinds of advocacy efforts to end mass incarceration. And also, please give because you believe in justice. Give as generously as you can, but we don't think of ourselves as a charity, we think of ourselves as solidarity. And it's an important model for us that people are all participating and that we all have a role. All of the money goes out, that's our model. We're not fundraising for ourselves. And we are so grateful to everybody who is partnering with us. We have to be in this work together. That's why it's a movement. And it's not a movement that anyone's on the outside of. It's only going to be successful if we're all in it together. And now to close out the evening, I'm thrilled to introduce Rhiannon Giddens. She's a social justice activist, a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient, co-founder of the Grammy Award-winning Carolina Chocolate Drops, and nominated for 6 Grammys as a soloist. I'm so excited for her performance. Please enjoy.
So I think that without art, there's no path to justice. That's why I believe in what Arts for Justice is doing, because without art, it's hard to find the way into somebody else's story. I just want to encourage, everyone this evening to continue to support Arts for Justice in any kind of way to create those emotional pathways for people. We need empathy more than anything right now. We need empathy, kindness, and an understanding, and art helps us get there. So thanks for listening. An old friend lay on his dying bed, held my hand to his bony breast, and he whispered low as I bent my head, oh, they're calling me home. They're calling me home. The time has come to sail away. I know you love for me to stay, but I miss my friends of yesterday. Oh, they're calling me home. They're calling me home. I know you remember me when I'm gone. Remember my story, remember my song. I'll leave them on earth, sweet traces of gold. Oh, they're calling me home. They're calling me home. So friends, gather round and bid me goodbye. My body's bound, but my soul will fly. My little light shining from the sky. Oh, they're calling me home. They're calling me home. The time has come to sail away. I know you love for me to stay, but I miss my friends of yesterday. Oh, they're calling me home. They're calling me